Got very good arms.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
First things first, I want to say I'm sorry. This was supposed to be out on Wednesday, but I was sick, and then yesterday was a holiday, and I just wasn't able to get it out on time. So I'm sorry this is coming out on a Friday, 2 days late, but I hope you enjoy my review of X-Force number 2. In X-Force number 1, Reavers infiltrated Krakoa and laid siege to the mutant homeland. Their target, Professor Charles Xavier. As we all know, they eventually cornered their man, assassinating him on the very soil meant to protect mutants. When I read the scene, I wondered if the new cadre of X-Men writers could make this death feel significant. Now that mutant resurrection is a big part of the fabric of the new X-Men status quo, it changes things quite a bit. Charles' murder was mentioned in some of the other X-Men comics, but they didn't really make it feel important. X-Force writer Ben Percy and artist Joshua Cassara make it feel very impactful in their follow-up issue this week. For a minute there, I thought my worst fears that death could no longer be meaningful in X-Men were coming true. But that isn't the case. It appears the assassination of Charles and the fallout will mostly be addressed here in X-Force. It's interesting, one of the biggest selling points of Dawn of X was all 6 series are telling one large, connected narrative following House of X Powers of 10. In all honesty, thus far it only feels like readers of House of X Powers of 10 need to follow Jonathan Hickman's X-Men and Ben Percy's X-Force. All the other series have some overarching themes and plot points, but ultimately feel disconnected from Hox and Pox. At least they do for me. A couple issues into Dawn of X, X-Force is easily my preferred series. Issues 1 and 2 are my overall favorites so far, with X-Men number 2 nipping on their heels. X-Force number 2 receives my highest recommendation. This is probably the best new ongoing comic series of 2019. Now let's get into all the details why in today's comic book review. The comic opens with a very dramatic scene of Magneto raising Cerebro while the mutants look over their slain leader. It's very intense. Like I said earlier, it's impactful. All the mutants are in a state of shock. X-Force is my personal favorite Dawn of X series on multiple levels, and one of them is unequivocally Joshua Cassara's art. I personally feel when I'm reading X-Force, I'm seeing Krakoa from Wolverine's perspective. It's not safe. It's a dangerous place, and mutants need to watch their six because there are forces out there gunning for them. Literally. I've heard some criticism the visuals are too muddy and the line art too sketchy. I personally think that's what makes it work so well. This is a very dark, gritty X-Men comic. There's a ton of very not nice stuff happening in this series so far, and Joshua Cassara's visual style, along with color artist Dean White, fit it perfectly. Do I think the art in the book is 5 stars? No. But I honestly think the art in most of the Dawn of X comics don't live up to the House of X Powers of 10 standard. X-Force is the exception. I think Cassara equals or exceeds the work Pepe Larraz put into House of X. It's not just the tone that Cassara does well. There's a couple other things that stand out. There's very creepy, disturbing imagery throughout this comic. It is absolutely for mature audiences only. Joshua Cassara adds a lot of gory details to scenes that really up the stakes for mutants and their adversaries. The fight scenes are very dynamic, and he has a special place in his heart for Wolverine. When Logan loses his cool in X-Force, he looks extremely ferocious. I really dig Joshua Cassara's art in X-Force number 2. It's not quite as dark as issue 1, but he ups the gore and intensity greatly. I rate his art 4.5 out of 5. There are a couple of standout character moments in the book I'm going to get to in a bit, but I want to hit the plot first. This is probably the best element of X-Force number 2. Ben Percy does a great job filling in some of the details readers may have missed in issue 1, like the Reavers grafting Domino's skin on their body and parachutes to infiltrate Krakoa's security, and the homing beacon slipped into Professor X's drink during his visit to Sokovia. He fits this seamlessly into this week's narrative and moves the story forward. X-Force number 2 is mostly a mystery story, which I like. Issue 1 is the event, and this is putting the pieces together so hopefully X-Force can extract righteous justice against their persecutors. There's another side narrative about Professor X and Resurrection, but the main through point is who did this and how did they do it. I assume we'll get to the why part when they finally get their hands on the men and women who sent the team into Krakoa. I haven't been very impressed with most of the Dawn of X white pages. A lot of them feel shoehorned in and inconsequential to the story. Ben Percy does a great job maximizing his white pages. The assassination query breaks down the preliminary results of the attack on Krakoa, lives lost, how Charles was tracked, where the assassins came from, and new security protocol in Krakoa, while the strange case of Phineas Hook fills in the blanks regarding what Domino was investigating and who she was after. It also explains some of the tradecraft the organization that captured Domino are using. Needless to say, both of these white pages save a ton of exposition during the story and afford Percy and Cassara the opportunity to flesh out other parts of the plot in excellent fashion. As far as I'm concerned, Percy's story is perfectly paced and executed this week. I rate the plot 5 out of 5. There is a ton of fantastic characterization in X-Force number 2. After the emotional opening scene, Magneto takes Marvel Girl aside. Magneto reconstructs the Cerebro Charles was wearing when he was murdered into a sword. This is fantastic symbolism. The people who order the assassination think they've crippled the mutant nation. In reality, they've woken a hornet's nest of heroes with powers they can't even imagine. The murder of Charles is galvanizing mutants to his cause. What he said about humans is even more real now, and the tip of the sword will come for them soon. There are a couple other interesting things we learned here. Charles' death is a huge opportunity for Magneto or Apocalypse or any of the other traditional leader characters to fill the vacuum. None of them try to take advantage of the situation and use it for their own personal gain or to alter Charles' vision. A very dramatic event just happened. It would be very easy to manipulate everyone to move away from their current trajectory. But nobody does, or at least they haven't yet. Now, does this mean they're all in lockstep with Charles' vision? Or perhaps his new vision is more in line with Magneto and Apocalypse's traditional goals? It's an interesting thing to think about. We also learned there are plans in place to resurrect Charles should he fall, but they've never been practiced before. All my military experience says this is terrible planning. You never want to be put into a position to perform contingency operations without preparation. You never know what can go wrong until you actually exercise emergency procedures. So many things can go sideways here. Jean has never actually uploaded a mutant soul back into a husk. Could this hurt her? Could she upload Charles' soul incorrectly? My mind is running here. What if, when she resurrects Charles, he's basically himself, but doesn't have his memories? What would a Charles Xavier, who hasn't experienced everything before House of X and Powers of 10, think about what's happening on Krakoa right now? Now, it's not going to happen, but it will be very fascinating to see. Charles' resurrection could get very interesting very fast. Some of the most interesting characterization in the story is given to the assassins that died on Krakoa. While one of them is still barely hanging on, they basically do a physical and mental autopsy of the Reavers. At the same time, Wolverine and Kid Omega investigate the origins of the Hit Squad. There's a lot of gnarly stuff revealed. I don't want to get into all the details because it's nuts, and most definitely needs to be learned during the story. But by the end of the comic, we know these Reavers are being grown and altered to be killing machines. And you get the picture that the mutant doctors are willing to put the Reavers through a tremendous amount of torment to learn information. It's kind of crazy. Did they forgo their Hippocratic oath to do no harm? Ethically, should they be healing these psychopaths so they can probe their minds? I think it's fair game, but should a doctor go along with this? The Reavers and their makers have certainly done far worse than the mutant so far, but mutant hands aren't exactly clean here either. I really like that Percy gets me thinking so much when I read this book. The last bit of characterization I want to talk about is Wolverine and Kid Omega. And I give Ben Percy a ton of credit here. I don't think most modern writers can make Kid Omega not completely hateable. He's a smarmy, know-it-all who talks too much, but Percy does a great job making him somewhat likable. Shocking, a writer who can make millennials not the worst. I would even go as far as to say some of the humor works here really well. I hope Dadverine isn't making a comeback here, but I wouldn't object to seeing more of Wolverine and Kid Omega in the future. Kid Omega is presented really powerful here, but his ego is even more enormous when he and Wolverine talk. My favorite part is when they end up in a room with a psionic damper that renders his telepathic abilities useless. It's great seeing him scared to death while Wolverine tells him, "You got fists, you got feet, you got teeth, animal instincts. Try it sometimes." It's great seeing his ego get deflated a bit and get heavily outshined by the old guard when business picks up. Writer Ben Percy packs a ton of fantastic character work in a relatively short amount of time. I rate the characterization in X-Force number 2, 5 out of 5. I can't speak highly enough about Ben Percy's X-Force. It's everything he said it was gonna be. It's a very gritty, dirty X-Men comic. It's not all action and blood and guts either. He and artist Joshua Cassara create several memorable moments that feel important. Most noticeably the reaction to Charles' assassination in the beginning of the story. Cassara is really on top of his game here. The mood and tone perfectly fit everything Percy is doing. I rate X-Force number 2, 5 out of 5 overall. This comic receives my highest recommendation. Dawn of X has been a bit of a mixed bag for me so far. X-Force has clearly separated itself from the pack and emerged as the best X-Men series on the market today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.